Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you're dishonest people.
In an extraordinary press conference, President Donald Trump assailed the media and defended his administration as a fine-tuned machine. He also faced questions about his crackdown on immigrants.
In addition, on the DACA program for immigration, what is your plan? Do you plan to continue that program or to end it?
We're going to show great heart.
So why is Daniel Ramirez sitting in a Tacoma, Washington jail? Last week, ICE arrested the 23-year-old, even though he has permission to live in the United States under President Obama's DACA program. That's Deferred Action for Childhood Removals. His lawyers call his detention unprecedented and unjustified. We'll also go to a Unitarian church in Denver, where an immigrant mother of 4 has taken refuge.
And if this system thinks that it can break me, that it can make me kneel, the system is wrong, because you can see the reasons behind me why I am fighting so hard to win my case. And I know that I am not alone, that there are many people in the community and in the immigrant community who share my anger and my passion for justice.
Finally, who is Alex Acosta? We'll speak with Think Progress editor Alan Pike, who says Trump's backup Labor Secretary nominee has skeletons in his closet, too. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Donald Trump assailed the media and defended his administration as a fine-tuned machine Thursday in a combative and rambling news conference at the White House. For 77 minutes, Trump took questions, frequently interrupting reporters, dismissing CNN and other outlets as fake news. Trump angrily denied reports his administration is in chaos following Monday's firing of National Security Advisor Michael Flynn.
I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. Chaos. Yet it is the exact opposite. This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine, despite the fact that I can't get my cabinet approved.
President Trump dismissed a New York Times report that members of his presidential campaign had repeated contacts with senior Russian intelligence officials in the lead-up to November's election. Trump called the report a joke and falsely stated it has been discredited. He later vowed to put a stop to leaks in his administration, saying the leaks were real, but the news is fake.
And on the leaks, is it fake news or are these real leaks?
Well, the leaks are real. You're the one that wrote about them and reported them. I mean, the leaks are real. You know what they said. You saw it. And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake.
We'll have more excerpts of President Trump's White House news conference after headlines. Across the country Thursday, thousands of immigrants closed their businesses, refused to go to work, and kept their children home from school for a day without immigrants. This was a protest against President Trump's crackdown against immigration and immigrants living in the United States. The protests in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Phoenix, Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, Raleigh, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, and other cities came after Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, sent shockwaves through immigrant communities by arresting close to 700 people in a series of raids last week. In Washington, D.C., hundreds of immigrants marched from the Mount Pleasant neighborhood to the White House. This is Irma Andino, an employee at Capital One Bank and an immigrant from El Salvador.
I'm hoping that it opens Congress's eyes, because if they were separated from their families, they wouldn't like it. And if I went to my country now, I wouldn't even know where to go, or what to do. I don't know it. I belong here. I'm part of here. I grew up here. So I think it's important to show support and to try to open their eyes that we're not here to be criminals, or, everybody is the same. We are all loved in God's eyes.
Thursday's immigration actions came as President Trump said he'll issue a new executive order on immigration rather than challenge a federal court's freeze on his ban on refugees and travelers from 7 majority Muslim nations. Trump said at Thursday's news conference he'll sign the new executive order next week.
As far as the new order is going to be very much tailored to what I consider to be a very bad decision, but we can tailor the order to that decision and get just about everything, in some ways more, but we're tailoring it now to the decision. We have some of the best lawyers in the country working on it.
President Trump's January 27th executive order canceled tens of thousands of visas, stranding travelers worldwide. It prompted unprecedented mass protests at airports around the U.S. Earlier this month, a unanimous panel of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals placed a stay on the order, saying the government failed to show that anyone from the 7 majority Muslim nations targeted in the travel ban had committed acts of terrorism. In New York City, demonstrators gathered outside a Manhattan federal building Thursday to protest recent ICE raids, including last Friday's arrest of Daniel Ramirez Medina in Washington state. Ramirez has permission to live and work in the United States under President Obama's program DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. His arrest alarmed immigrant communities who fear the Trump administration could soon target other DACA recipients. This is Yitziri Tovar, an immigrant who was brought to the U.S. as a child.
We're here because we demand the release of Daniel. He is a DACA recipient. He was arrested, and he is now being detained. And they're saying that they're going to deport him. You know, when DACA came around, that was one of the promises that was made to us. And he has no criminal record, and there's no reason why he should be detained.
A hearing in Daniel Ramirez's case is scheduled for today. On Thursday, the Justice Department claimed in a legal brief that Ramirez was arrested because agents suspected he might be part of a gang. Meanwhile, lawyers for Ramirez said Thursday immigration officials doctored a document to make it seem as though Ramirez admitted he belonged to a criminal gang. A photograph of Ramirez's original statement read, quote, "I came in and the officer said I have gang affiliation with gangs, so I wear an orange uniform." Lawyers say the document was altered to read, quote, "I have gang affiliation with gangs, so I wear an orange uniform." We'll have more on the case of Daniel Ramirez Medina and Thursday's Day Without Immigrants later in the broadcast. Opponents of the Trump administration have planned a series of over 100 strikes and protests in cities across the United States. Organizers of the Strike for Democracy actions say they're looking to move beyond demonstrations to resist the Trump administration along economic lines. They're also building momentum for planned strikes on March 8th, International Women's Day, and May 1st, International Workers' Day. President Trump has named longtime Republican lawyer Alex Acosta to be his new nominee to head the Labor Department after his first pick, fast food CEO Andrew Puzder, withdrew Wednesday. Acosta's labor experience includes 8 months as a member of the National Labor Relations Board under President George W. Bush. He's drawn scrutiny for his time as a division leader at the Bush Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, where he oversaw a senior official who hired conservative lawyers who were actively opposed to the division's mission, including the prosecution of voting rights violations and police abuse. We'll have more on Alex Acosta later in the broadcast. On Capitol Hill, President Trump's nominee for U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, was repeatedly interrupted by Jewish and Palestinian protesters Thursday as he testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
It's a great privilege to address this committee, which has done so much to advance America's interests around the world.
Mr. Friedman also said that Palestinian refugees don't have a claim to the land, don't have a connection to Palestine.
David Friedman, you promote racism, fund illegal settlements.
Sit down. This guy
You
here
will not be silenced.
This guy here blew the show.
You do not represent us, and you will never represent us.
David Friedman has no diplomatic experience and worked as a bankruptcy lawyer for Donald Trump over the last 15 years. He served as president of an organization which raised millions of dollars to support illegal Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. He's also called liberal American Jews worse than capos, a reference to Jewish prisoners who worked for the Nazis during the Holocaust. On Thursday, Friedman apologized for the remarks.
I provided some context for my remarks, but that was not in the nature of an excuse. There is no excuse. I will if you want me to rationalize it or justify it, I cannot. These were hurtful words, and I deeply regret them. They're not reflective of my nature or my character.
David Friedman told senators he sees a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as the best possibility for peace in the region. That's despite his past claims to the contrary and yesterday's comment from President Trump backing away from 2 decades of U.S. support for a two-state solution. President Trump's newest nominee to serve as National Security Advisor, retired Vice Admiral Robert Harward, turned down the position Thursday, reportedly telling a friend the offer amounted to a S-bleep sandwich. CNN reports Harward used the expletive to describe a White House in chaos after President Trump fired his previous National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, Monday. Harward said in an official statement he turned down the job to address financial and family issues. In Oklahoma, a district judge ordered State Attorney General Scott Pruitt to release thousands of pages of correspondence with oil, coal, and gas companies as Republicans vowed to press ahead with a vote today on whether to confirm Pruitt as head of the Environmental Protection Agency. Thursday's ruling cited Pruitt's abject failure to follow the Oklahoma Open Records Act. Pruitt's office will have until next Tuesday to release about 3,000 emails that reportedly show his close ties to executives at energy companies, including Koch Industries. He's expected to be narrowly confirmed by the Senate before the emails are made public. Meanwhile, employees of the EPA are mounting a campaign urging their senators to vote against Scott Pruitt's confirmation. Members of the National Treasury Employees Union say they fear Pruitt will suppress scientific findings and undermine their work, and that the Trump administration might even seek to abolish the EPA entirely. In Pakistan, a suicide bomb blast ripped through a dance celebration at a Sufi Muslim shrine Thursday, killing at least 77 people and wounding hundreds of worshippers in a remote part of the southern Sindh province. Survivors of the bombing described a horrific scene.
As soon as I entered the shrine, I heard a dreadful sound. The first thought that came to my mind was that this could not be a bomb blast, but then the next thought that came to my mind was that we were dead. It was like doomsday.
An offshoot of the self-proclaimed Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack in Pakistan, which was the deadliest single assault there in recent years. The Pentagon's admitted U.S. warplanes fired depleted uranium munitions during air raids in Syria, despite a vow not to use the toxic and radioactive weapons in the battlefield. Foreign Policy magazine reported this week Air Force A-10 attack planes fired more than 5,000 rounds of 30-millimeter depleted uranium rounds during a pair of assaults on convoys in an ISIS-controlled part of eastern Syria in November of 2015. Depleted uranium is both toxic and highly radioactive, and many medical experts have linked its use to cancer and birth defects. The House of Representatives has approved a measure that would pave the way for states to withhold hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funds from Planned Parenthood and other women's health care providers. The resolution passed Thursday would overturn a rule adopted by the Obama administration during its final weeks in office that bars states from withholding federal family planning dollars from providers that offer abortions. The measure now heads to the Senate, where it has strong support among majority Republicans. In Florida, the state Supreme Court blocked a law Thursday requiring a woman seeking an abortion to wait at least 24 hours after her first meeting her doctor. The American Civil Liberties Union hailed the ruling, saying in a statement, quote, "Politicians have no business interfering with a woman's private health care decisions, including the decision to have an abortion." And in New York, the board of directors of the city's public library system has voted to name Harlem's 115th Street Library after Harry Belafonte. The legendary activist, civil rights leader, and entertainer was born not far from the library that will now bear his name. Belafonte was one of Martin Luther King's closest confidants and helped organize the March on Washington in 1963. He turns 90 years old on March 1st. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. On Thursday afternoon, Donald Trump held his first solo press conference as president. Trump began by announcing he'd nominated Alexander Acosta to be Labor Secretary nominee, but then Trump soon began an extended attack on the media, accusing CNN and other outlets of peddling fake news. The press conference went on for 77 minutes. Here are some of the excerpts of what happened.
The press has become so dishonest that if we don't talk about it, we are doing a tremendous disservice to the American people. Tremendous disservice. We have to talk about it to find out what's going on, because the press honestly is out of control. The level of dishonesty is out of control. As you know, our administration inherited many problems across government and across the economy. To be honest, I inherited a mess. It's a mess. At home and abroad, a mess. I turn on the TV, open the newspapers, and I see stories of chaos. Chaos. Yet it is the exact opposite. This administration is running like a fine-tuned machine, despite the fact that I can't get my cabinet approved. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. President, you said today that you had the biggest electoral margin since Ronald Reagan with 304, 306 electoral votes. In fact, President Obama got 365 in 2008. President Obama 332, and George H.W. Bush 426 when he won as president. So why should Americans trust?
Well, no, I was given that information. I don't know. I was just given. We had a very, very big margin.
I guess my question is, why should Americans trust you when you accuse the information they receive of being fake when you're providing information that's...
Well, I don't know. I was given that information. I've seen that information around. But it was a very substantial victory. Do you agree with that?
You're the president.
Okay, thank you. That's a good answer.
What will you do on the leaks you have said twice today?
Yes, we're looking at them very, very seriously. I've gone to all of the folks in charge of the various agencies, and I've actually called the Justice Department to look into the leaks. Those are criminal leaks.
On the leaks, is it fake news or are these real leaks?
Well, the leaks are real. You're the one that wrote about them and reported them. I mean, the leaks are real. You know what they said. You saw it. And the leaks are absolutely real. The news is fake because so much of the news is fake. I can handle a bad story better than anybody, as long as it's true. And, you know, over a course of time, I'll make mistakes and you'll write badly, and I'm okay with that. But I'm not okay when it is fake. I mean, I watch CNN. It's so much anger and hatred, and just the hatred.
Did you direct Mike Flynn to discuss sanctions with the Russian ambassador?
No, I didn't.
Prior to your inauguration?
No, I didn't. But Mike,
you fired him.
Excuse me.
Had it leaked out.
No, I fired him because of what he said to Mike Pence. Very simple. Mike was doing his job. He was calling countries and his counterparts. So it certainly would have been okay with me if he did it. I would have directed him to do it if I thought he wasn't doing it. I didn't direct him, but I would have directed him because that's his job.
You said that the leaks are real, but the news is fake. I guess I don't understand. It seems that there's a disconnect there. If the information coming from those leaks is real, then how can the stories be fake?
The reporting is fake.
And if I may ask, I just want to ask.
Jim, you know what it is? Here's the thing. The public isn't, you know, they read newspapers, they see television, they watch. They don't know if it's true or false because they're not involved. I'm involved. I've been involved with this stuff all my life, but I'm involved. So I know when you're telling the truth or when you're not. I just see many, many untruthful things. And I'll tell you what else I see. I see tone, you know, the word tone. The tone is such hatred. I'm really not a bad person, by the way. No, but the tone is such, I do get good ratings, you have to admit that. The tone is such hatred. I certainly didn't win by people listening to you people, that's for sure. But I'm having a good time. Tomorrow they will say, Donald Trump rants and raves at the press. I'm not ranting and raving. I'm just telling you, you know, you're dishonest people. But I'm not ranting and raving. I love this. I'm having a good time doing it. But tomorrow the headlines are going to be Donald Trump rants and raves. I'm not ranting and raving. The whole Russian thing, that's a ruse. That's a ruse. And by the way, it would be great if we could get along with Russia, just so you understand that. Now, tomorrow you'll say, Donald Trump wants to get along with Russia. This is terrible. It's not terrible. It's good.
On the travel ban, would you accept that that was a good example of the smooth running of government?
Yeah, I do. I do. Let me tell you about the travel ban.
Were there any mistakes in that?
Wait. I know who you are. Just wait. Let me tell you about the travel ban. We had a very smooth rollout of the travel ban, but we had a bad court. got a bad decision. We had a court that's been overturned. Again, may be wrong, but I think it's 80% of the time. A lot. We had a bad decision. We're going to keep going with that decision. We're going to put in a new executive order next week sometime.
Can you say whether you are aware that anyone who advised your campaign had contacts with Russia during the course of the election?
Well, I told you, General Flynn obviously was dealing, so that's one person, but he was dealing as he should have been.
During the election?
No, nobody that I know of. Nobody
so you're not aware of any contacts during the course
look.
of the election?
How many times do I have to answer this question?
Can you just say
Russia
yes or no
is
on
a
it?
ruse. Are you a friendly reporter? Watch how friendly he is. Wait, watch how friendly he is. Go ahead.
What we are concerned about, and what we haven't really heard being addressed, is an uptick in anti-Semitism and how the government is planning to take care of it. There's been a report out that 48 bomb threats have been made against Jewish centers all across the country in the last couple of weeks. There are people who are committing anti-Semitic acts or threatening to.
You see, he said he was going to ask a very simple, easy question. And it's not.
It's an important.
It's not a simple question, not a fair question. Okay, sit down. I understand the rest of your question. So here's the story, folks. Number one, I am the least anti-Semitic person that you've ever seen in your entire life. Number two, racism, the least racist person. In fact, we did very well relative to other people running as a Republican. Quiet, quiet, quiet. See, he lied about he was going to get up and ask a very straight, simple question. So, you know, it's welcome to the world of the media.
Well, when you say the inner cities, are you going to include the CBC, Mr. President, in your conversations with your urban agenda, your inner city agenda, as well as?
Am I going to include?
Are you going to include the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic
Well, I would.
Caucus,
I tell you what. Do you want to set up the meeting? Do you want to set up the meeting?
No.
Are they friends of yours?
I'm just a reporter.
No, set up the meeting.
I know some of them, but I'm sure
Let's go. Set up a meeting.
Excerpts from President Trump's news conference on Thursday. That last voice was April Ryan, Washington bureau chief for American Urban Radio Networks. When we come back, President Trump vowed to show great heart for recipients of President Obama's DACA program, that's Deferred Action for Childhood Removals. So why is dreamer Daniel Ramirez sitting in a Tacoma, Washington jail? Next up, stay with us.
Quien dice que yo soy un malinchista y que traiciona mi bandera y mi nación, para que rompa con mi canto las fronteras, les voy a abrir de par en par mi corazón, deje las tumbas de mis padres, mis abuelos, llegué llorando a tierra de anglosajón. Yo trabajaba, mis hijos iban creciendo, todos nacieron bajo de esta gran nación, y mis derechos los han ido pisoteando, van formulando leyes de constitución. ¿Qué haré ya viejo si me quitan mi dinero? Yo solo quiero mi seguro de pensión. Pero qué importa si soy nuevo ciudadano, sigo siendo mexicano como el pulque y el nopal.
My Two Countries by Los Tigres de Norte. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Across the country Thursday, thousands of immigrants closed their businesses, refused to go to work, kept their children home from school for a day without immigrants. It was a protest against President Trump's crackdown on immigrants living in the United States. The protests in San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Phoenix, Chicago, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Detroit, Washington, D.C., Raleigh and Charlotte, North Carolina, Austin, Texas, and other cities came after Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, sent shockwaves through immigrant communities by arresting at least 680 people in a series of raids last week. Today, we're going to look at two cases. One is of an immigrant mother of 4 who's lived here for 20 years and has now taken sanctuary in a Denver church to avoid possible deportation. The other, well, we're going to start with Donald Trump's press conference yesterday, because the case involves DACA.
In addition, on the DACA program for immigration, what is your plan? Do you plan to continue that program or to end it?
We're going to show great heart.
Donald Trump saying we're going to show great heart. So why is Daniel Ramirez Medina sitting in jail? He's a 23-year-old father who was detained by ICE last week in Des Moines, Washington, even though he has permission to live and work in the United States under President Obama's DACA program, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. A hearing in the case is scheduled for today. His lawyers have called his detention unprecedented and unjustified. On Thursday, the Justice Department claimed in a legal briefing that Ramirez was arrested because agents suspected he might be part of a gang based on a tattoo on his arm that reads La Paz, which means peace, and BCS, which stands for Baja California Sur, the Mexican state where Ramirez was born. His lawyers say Ramirez is not part of a gang. He's been in the United States since he was 7 years old, and is the immigrant father of a 3-year-old son who is also a U.S. citizen. His supporters have maintained a vigil at the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, Washington, where he's being held. It's a private detention center owned by the for-profit prison company GEO Group. For more, we go to Seattle, Washington, where we're joined by Lorena Gonzalez. She's Seattle's first Latina council member. Before being elected in 2015, she worked for a decade as a civil rights attorney. Welcome to Democracy Now!, council member. Can you explain how Daniel Ramirez ended up in jail?
Well, the facts as we know them is that Daniel was at the home of his father just south of Seattle, and ICE showed up in the morning to pick up his dad with a warrant. And at that time, his dad had asked for permission to go back into the house to let his son know that what was happening. And at that time, ICE also entered back into the home with Daniel's father and began to ask Daniel questions. And when they asked him the questions, they asked him whether he was born here and whether he was in the country legally. And based on his answers, they arrested him.
Is this the first time that you've seen this happen?
This is the first time that we know of a DACA recipient being arrested under a Trump administration. And you know, as far as we knew last week, and as we know now, he had his DACA permit with him, on him, when he was arrested. He repeatedly told the ICE agents that he had permission to be in the country, and nonetheless, they decided to exercise their discretion in arresting him and booking him into the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, where he sits now.
What effect has this had on DACA young people, dreamers throughout Washington? I mean, in a moment, we're going to go to Denver, where we speak with a woman, an immigrant mother of 4, who just took sanctuary in a Unitarian church. And she told me yesterday that it was seeing Daniel Ramirez being arrested that caused her, one of the reasons she sought refuge in the church. I mean, he is allowed to be in this country and work.
Right. I think the impact has been huge. So Washington State has about 28,000 DACA recipient youngsters, and you know, Seattle is home to a public university. Washington State has been very generous in terms of providing a pathway for DACA recipients to go to our public universities with financial aid. And what we are hearing, and what I'm hearing, is that people are genuinely concerned. If somebody who has the legal right to be in this country is arrested, what does that mean for my parents that aren't legally authorized to be in the country? That is a very chilling effect, and we are hearing stories of people who don't want to go to school because they're afraid that they're going to be caught in a raid. You know, parents who are starting to bunker down because they are nervous that there might be some sort of enforcement action on them with or without a warrant. These are very serious concerns, and I think that we are all experiencing uncertainty under this particular administration, and I think now it's time for DACA students, DACA recipients, unfortunately, to be experiencing even more uncertainty about what their future is in this country. And this administration, they have a responsibility and an obligation to tell us, the American people, and to tell these young people who have done everything that they were supposed to do under Obama's DACA program, what their future will be in this country. And we won't stop until we get an answer to that particular question.
I mean, the problem for Dreamers, for young DACA folks, is that they came out of the shadows. They gave all their information over to the government with the idea that they would be legalized, which they are for this period of time. So what does this mean when the government that took their information now turns against them?
I think it's problematic. And, you know, before I was elected, I came up in the immigrant rights movement. We've been fighting for years for comprehensive immigration reform. And the best we could get under the Obama administration was relief for these Dreamers. And this is a policy that has bipartisan support, has always had bipartisan support, and we feel very strongly that we need to keep the program intact and that we need to continue to protect these Dreamers who came here very, very young, who have contributed to society meaningfully. And you know, I think at this point, when we are talking to Dreamers, we encourage them to continue to live their life in the way that will create a pathway for them to become a citizen. But there's no question that the reason why Daniel's case is so important is because it's the first incident under a Trump administration in which a Dreamer has been arrested, a lawful legal Dreamer has been arrested. And what happens today, I think, will send a signal one way or the other to the 750,000 Dreamers in our country as to what this president intends to do as it relates to those almost 1 million people living in this country whose future right now is uncertain, unfortunately.
So are you telling people they should apply for DACA now or not? Hold off.
Right now, all of the immigrant rights organizations are recommending that people, even if you think you qualify for DACA, that you do not qualify for DACA right now. If you are in the process of applying, the recommendation is that you continue to finish that process, but we are not encouraging additional Dreamers who have not previously applied to apply at this moment.
So Chicago Congressmember Luis Gutierrez was among a group of Latino congressmen who were barred from a meeting Thursday with a top federal immigration enforcement official, while lawmakers who did make the meeting are worrying that all undocumented people are at risk for deportation. What about this barring, and are you able to speak with local ICE to find out what their plans are?
I am terribly disappointed to hear that our congressional leaders were kept out of a meeting that was first set, canceled, and then rescheduled without notifying the original attendees. It is just a clear sign of disrespect. It's a clear sign of lack of transparency and an unwillingness to share information. Here in Seattle, both the mayor and I have made requests to meet with the regional director here for our ICE Seattle field office. And just yesterday, we received word from their spokesperson that that meeting would not be able to be accommodated. So we are experiencing here locally, where we are feeling the greatest impact of Daniel's arrest, we're experiencing the same type of stonewalling that is occurring in Washington, D.C. to our federal delegation. And I think it's irresponsible.
What happens today in Daniel's hearing? What are the possible outcomes as he sits in this Tacoma jail?
Well, I think the possible outcomes is, and the best outcome is that Judge Donahue, who is the judge in the case, agrees with Daniel and his position and his lawyers, and that they order his release immediately. That's a best case scenario. Worst case scenario is that the judge agrees with ICE and continues to hold Daniel and he has to go through the removal proceedings that ultimately will result potentially in him being deported. There are some shades of gray there. The federal government is arguing that our federal district court doesn't even have jurisdiction over this matter or this case, and that it should be an immigration judge who sits down at the Northwest Detention Center who decides the fate of Daniel. And so those are three different things that could come out of today. But of course, we're all on pins and needles here in Seattle and Washington State, hoping for the best outcome, not just for Daniel, but again for the 750,000 Dreamers that live across the country.
Lorena Gonzalez, I want to thank you for being with us. Council Member Gonzalez is the first Latino council member in Seattle. Before being elected in 2015, she worked for a decade as a civil rights attorney. So we go now from Seattle, Washington, to Denver, Colorado, where another parent is also fighting against possible deportation by seeking sanctuary in a church. On Thursday, I spoke with Jeanette Vizquera, a mother of 4 children who's taken refuge in the First Unitarian Society Church of Denver out of fear she would be arrested and deported to Mexico if she went to her scheduled check-in with Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. She has lived in this country for 20 years. She has 4 children here. I began by asking her by Skype as she sat in the church with her translator how she decided to seek sanctuary in the church.
So in 2012, when I came back to the United States from my mother's funeral, I knew that my case depended only on the discretion of Immigration and Customs Enforcement because my court process had already ended. And I came back to the U.S., I knew that I was going to need to organize more protection, not only for myself, but for other people in the community. And I began working with the American Friends Service Committee to create the Sanctuary Coalition. So fortunately for me, I have not needed to enter refuge or sanctuary here at the church. The first person who benefited from that was Arturo Hernandez Garcia, and thanks to God that he was able to go home and is still here with his family. And what led me to take the decision this time in my case was the silence from Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security about my stay application that I submitted on December 7th. They kept saying over and over again that they were just reviewing my case, They wouldn't give us any information. And then last week, with the arrest and deportation of Guadalupe, as well as the detention of a young dreamer named Daniel, who has DACA, I decided that it was not worth the risk to go and present myself at Immigration and Customs Enforcement.
You have lived in the United States for 20 years. Why did you come here in 1997?
Sí, tengo 20 años viviendo aquí. Yo vine en el año 97. Yes, I came here in 1997. First, my husband came, and 3 months later, myself and my oldest daughter came to the United States. And we came because my husband, who was working as a chauffeur for a bus company, had suffered 3 kidnapping experiences while driving the bus.
You have 4 children. Can you tell us how old they are and what their names are?
Yes, I have 4 children. My oldest is almost 27. Her name is Tanya, and she's protected by the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. And then my other 3 were born here in the United States. Luna is 12, Roberto is 10, and my littlest is 6. Her name is Suri.
And how are the children affected by what's happening to you right now? They came with you into the church.
So my children have been walking this journey with me for many, many years now. They have always been by my side in the work that I do in the community. And so we have talked many times over the years about what would happen on a day like this. Ever since we founded the Sanctuary Coalition, I have talked with them about there might be a day that I would need to take refuge in the church. None of us were happy about the decision that came down yesterday from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We were all hugging and crying together, but my children said to me, "I'm so glad that you are safe." And the difference for them is that I'm not deported to Mexico. And they kept saying, "You're in a safe place, Mama. It's going to be okay."
What message, Jeanette, do you have for President Trump?
So my message for President Trump is that he's doing a bad job administering the country. The decisions that he's making are a big mistake, and that not only with the immigrant community from Latin America, but also communities from around the world, the Muslim community, Southeast Asian communities, and other communities. What would happen to this country if you lost the labor force of immigrants here in the United States who would pick crops, work in your hotels, restaurants, and construction, who would keep the engine of the economy moving forward? If he continues to target the immigrant community, it's this whole country that will suffer the consequences economically. So the other message that I would like to say to President Trump is, I'm just a mother who wants to work hard for her children and be with her family, and that's all that I've ever done in this country. And even though you have money and you have power, that money and power will not help you if your children are ever suffering, if they're ever sick. It won't change the fact that they're suffering harm. And I wish that you would think of the harm that you're causing my children. The other thing that I want to ask is, supposedly I'm a criminal because I drove without a license, because I had expired stickers on my car, because I had false documents to work and put food on the table for my children. But what should we call you, Mr. President Trump, when you've been evading taxes for years, when the way that you've been acting is not in keeping with good conscience?
Eso es evasión de impuestos y también es un crimen. That is often misunderstood in this country, that you, Jeanette, have paid taxes all of these years.
Yes, my husband and I have both paid taxes the whole 20 years that we've been living here. Every year we have paid taxes and we've contributed our labor. And what many people don't know is that immigrants can't access the benefits of those taxes, any of the programs. That all stays here with this country. So I would like to ask you, if you're going to deport me, are you going to return 20 years of labor and taxes to me before I go, everything that I've contributed here?
That's Jeanette Vizguera, who came to the United States from Mexico 20 years ago in 1997. She's one of the founders of the Metro Denver Sanctuary Coalition, and she's helped other undocumented immigrants seek sanctuary. She's previously won 5 postponements of deportation, but said Wednesday she doubts she could win a similar reprieve under the Trump administration. And so she has taken refuge in Denver's Unitarian Church. For more, we go to Denver, where we're joined by Reverend Mike Moran, the senior minister at that church, the First Unitarian Church of Denver, where Jeanette Vizguera has taken sanctuary. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Reverend Moran. Can you talk about your church's decision to be a sanctuary church and to take in Jeanette and her family?
I'd be happy to. We began doing immigration justice work in earnest probably around 2012. At that time, we tried very hard to form alliances with groups that were already working in immigration justice around Denver. That included the American Friends Service Committee, the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition, El Centro Humanitario, and other groups, Interfaith Alliance, Together Colorado, and so on. So we had good relationships with those organizations, and we were approached by them, by the American Friends Service Committee and the Colorado Immigrant Rights Coalition in particular, in January of 2014. They asked us if we would, as a congregation, offer sanctuary to someone that was facing deportation. It was a very short time frame that they had at that time. I think it was 7 or 10 days. That was not enough time to poll the whole congregation, so the Board of Trustees took up the issue. They voted that they would bring someone into sanctuary, and that we would inform and bring the rest of the congregation up to speed later. It turned out that we did not need to do it at that time. That individual received a stay, but it began a conversation within our congregation for about 5 months, and we brought in guest speakers. I preached on this several times. We answered lots of questions about for congregation members about the legal liability, about our legal representation we might need, what it would mean for our church insurance, and the logistics of where they would stay within the building, and many other kinds of questions. The congregation did vote as a whole congregation. We're about 400 members, and the congregation did vote in May of that year that we would be a sanctuary congregation. And we were able to welcome Arturo Hernandez Garcia into sanctuary in October of that year.
I remember coming to your church to interview Arturo Hernandez Garcia, who had taken refuge in 2015, undocumented immigrant who took refuge at the Unitarian Church. And I asked him why he did that.
I'm risk to deportation. October 21st, I have my final order for deportation. And the reason coming here is because I want to file my case.
Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up going into deportation proceedings? You had a tile business?
Yeah, I'm working on constructions, usually big constructions like apartments, 100, 200, 300 apartments, and 100 the people working in there. And I am traveling with one person, and I have that discussion with him, and they called the police, and the police, they arrested me. And after that, immigration put the whole immigration hold.
So that was Arturo Hernandez Garcia in 2015, and that was under President Obama. Now Jeanette has come in with her family, and this is 2017. And you have the Trump administration threatening to cut off funding for any city that engages in sanctuary. What about churches? What do you face, Reverend Moran? I know that Jeanette has the support of Jared Polis, who is the Congress member from the area, from Mayor Hancock, has gotten support from a number of public officials. In fact, I believe Jared Polis has introduced legislation that would protect her into the U.S. Congress.
Yes, that's correct.
So do you face any sanction being a sanctuary church?
Do I face sanctions? We hope not. So there is a law about harboring fugitives, but the harboring definition includes an attempt to conceal, and we are not trying to conceal anything. In fact, we will tell anyone. We will write a personal letter to President Trump about Jeanette Vizquera and where she is living at the current time. So we believe we are not breaking any laws by having her in the church.
So can ICE enter the church and rip her out?
That's an excellent question. So under the Obama administration, there was a policy. It was not a law. It was just a policy that Immigration and Customs Enforcement had that they would not come onto what were called sensitive properties. That was churches, schools, hospitals, places like that. They would not come onto those properties to make arrests. We believe that policy is still in place. We certainly counted on that when Arturo was staying with us. But frankly, we have absolutely no idea if the Trump administration will continue that policy or if they will begin making arrests on schools, churches, hospital properties.
And what are you willing to do to protect her? How far will the church go?
Well, I mean, we're certainly not going to get into any physical tussles with ICE agents if they show up at our congregation. We do have a protocol with the building itself, and it's posted on the door for anyone who might answer the door if ICE comes knocking. And if ICE comes knocking, we will ask them if they have a warrant, and if they do not have a warrant, we will tell them they cannot come in. If they do have a warrant, we will ask to see it. We have an attorney that we are working with. We will fax that warrant to the attorney and ask ICE to wait while we do that. And if the attorney says the warrant is good, we will have to, at that point, legally let them in.
Well, Reverend Mike Moran, I want to thank you for being with us, senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of Denver, where Jeanette Visquera is taking sanctuary, an immigrant mother of 4. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, who is the new Labor Secretary nominee? Stay with us.
Pumpkin pie, chocolate candy, Jesus Christ, ain't nothing please you more than you. As you come home, home is whenever I'm with you. As you come home, home is whenever I'm with you.
Home, music cover by Jorge Narvaez and his daughter, Alexa. Jorge dedicated the song to his mother, who was deported to Mexico in 2007. He reunited with her in 2014. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We turn now to President Trump's new nominee to head the Labor Department. His first pick, fast food CEO Andrew Puzder, withdrew on Wednesday after massive protests for months. And it became clear that he lacked support from the key Republicans ahead of his confirmation hearing that was supposed to be held yesterday. President Trump announced his second choice at his news conference on Thursday.
I just wanted to begin by mentioning that the nominee for Secretary of the Department of Labor will be Mr. Alex Acosta. He has a law degree from Harvard Law School. He's a great student, former clerk for Justice Samuel Alito, and he has had a tremendous career.
Alex Acosta is a longtime Republican attorney. He served 8 months as a member of the National Labor Relations Board under President George W. Bush. He's drawn scrutiny for his time as division leader at George W. Bush's Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, where he oversaw a senior official who hired conservative lawyers who actively opposed the division's mission, including the prosecution of voting rights violations and police abuse. In 2004, Acosta played a key role in Bush's final push to win the state of Ohio by backing Republican election officials accused of seeking to suppress voter turnout among blacks and Latinos. Acosta is currently dean of Florida International University's School of Law. For more, we go to Washington, D.C., where we're joined by Think Progress editor Alan Pike. His latest article is headlined, "Who is Alex Acosta? Trump's backup labor secretary has skeletons in his closet, too." Welcome to Democracy Now!, Alan. What are those skeletons? Talk about Alex Acosta's record.
I think the fundamental problem for Acosta is likely to be his tenure at the top of the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice under George W. Bush. He's a man with a long record of public service going back to the mid-1990s. But there's this key period from about 2003 to about 2005 during which Bush officials were intentionally sabotaging this key agency within the DOJ. This is the group that prosecutes voting rights cases, that upholds elections integrity, that conducts police oversight and enforces employment law, anti-discrimination law. Basically every civil rights case that the federal government brings or investigates comes to the CRD. There was a man named Bradley Schlotzman who worked underneath Acosta, who went out of his way quite intentionally to skew their hiring for a period of years to ensure that they would hire people he viewed as, quote unquote, real Americans. And for your viewers who remember the Bush years, that was the dividing line thrown down ideologically between authentic conservative Americans and, I don't know, somehow fake liberal-leaning Americans. So the Civil Rights Division was permanently sabotaged by a couple of years of intentional misconduct. And Acosta wasn't directly involved, but he was overseeing the guy conducting that sabotage and had every reason to know about it. And there's an Inspector General's report from 2008 on their investigation into the scandal that holds Acosta pretty directly accountable.
So talk about what happened in 2004 in Ohio, and what is Alex Acosta's connection to that?
So there's a bunch of different ways that you can try to suppress the vote, right? And one of the most popular among Republicans is a tactic called vote caging, where you generate a list of people who you suspect are Democratic voters, and you send letters to their most recent address. And if the letters aren't returned, then you tell the Board of Elections, this person's no longer registered at the correct address, and you should strike them from the rolls. And then when they show up on Election Day, they're told they're not registered to vote, and they can't vote. So the Ohio Republican Party I attempted to cage, I think it's something like 25 or 35,000 primarily black voters in the state of Ohio in the closing weeks of the 2004 election. And it ended up in court, as these things usually do. It was not a court case that involved the federal government. The DOJ was not involved. Alex Acosta had not been asked by the judge to weigh in any way. But he nonetheless sent a letter personally to the judge in the case 4 days before Election Day, urging him to accept the Republican counsel's logic and to uphold their voter suppression scheme. So it's regarded by career attorneys in the Civil Rights Division as a wildly inappropriate use of his office. One of his colleagues at the time called it outrageous in press reports about what happened. And that 2004 letter has dogged him throughout his subsequent career. At one point, in 2014, he was a finalist to become the dean of the University of Florida's law school, which would be a sort of a promotion from his current gig at FIU Law. And he was removed from the finalist pool in part because law faculty at the University of Florida strenuously objected to his application, to his candidacy, and one of the things they pointed to was that 2004 letter.
Can you talk about what this nomination means for the Department of Labor?
Sure. I think there's some poetry here in the sense that the outgoing Secretary of Labor, Tom Perez, was also a career lawyer and a career public servant. And when he came in at the Civil Rights Division, which was his first job under President Obama, he had to clean up the mess that Alex Acosta and Bradley Schlotzman and George W. Bush had made of the Civil Rights Division. There are a couple of famous moments from 2009, 2010, where Perez and Holder had to sort of go to the Civil Rights Division staff and tell them, look, you're open for business again. This is once again an agency of the federal government that's going to do its job. That's how dark and how deep the damage was from the Bush years. And now we've got another career attorney coming in to run the Department of Labor, sort of in the reverse pattern of Perez's own career arc within the Obama administration. And I think it's noteworthy that there is such a contrast between Andy Puzder, Donald Trump's original nominee, fast food CEO with a sort of brash outward demeanor and a negative reputation, and lots of Oppo research kept coming out and coming out and coming out. Puzder sort of fits the Trump brand. Alex Acosta is a much more sort of buttoned-up professional type of guy. His reputation is for highly competent management. He's got a decade, 2 decades of public service behind him. And if you're a progressive or a liberal or a Democrat, that's probably almost more worrying than the idea of Andy Puzder running the Department of Labor, because Acosta's record is as someone who can very competently execute the agenda of his boss inside of a complex federal bureaucracy. So if you want to find somebody who can sabotage a federal agency and turn it against its whole purpose, Alex Acosta's resume is glimmering. It's exactly who you want if you're out to sabotage the Department of Labor.
Well, Alan Pike, I want to thank you for being with us, editor with Think Progress. His latest article, Who is Alex Acosta? Trump's backup labor secretary has skeletons in his closet, too. That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Burke, Nermeen Sheikh, Carla Wills, Laura Gottesdiener, Dina Guzder, Sam Alcoff, Ravi Karan, Hani Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Andre Lewis, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Paul Huckabee, our engineers. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.